Hello, and welcome to Monumental, where we sit down with entrepreneurs, leaders, visionaries, and big thinkers making monumental change. Here's your host, Evan Holiday.
Welcome to Monumental. I'm your host, Evan Holiday, and today on the show, we have Chad Carson. Chad, great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Evan. It is great to be here.
Yes. So a little backstory. Chad and I actually met at Bigger Pockets conference in Nashville maybe 4 months ago, 3-4 months ago in October. It was the first ever Bigger Pockets conference. Lots of A players, including Chad himself. And so here we are today on Monumental. So a little bit of background on Chad. Chad is an active real estate investor and entrepreneur from Clemson, South Carolina. When not investing, you'll find Chad traveling with his wife and 2 young kids, playing pickup basketball, hiking, learning something new, and helping build trails in his local community. He also writes and teaches at CoachCarson.com, and he has a pretty big newsletter following and blog following there about using real estate investing to retire early and do what matters. And that really, really resonates with our Monumental audience. He's also the author of Retire Early with Real Estate and is the host of the podcast Real Estate and Financial Independence. I don't know why I could say that, but I'm excited to have you on the show here, Chad. Why don't you give our listeners a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And you were one of the A players at the Bigger Pockets conference as well. I was just going to mention that. So in case anybody was wondering, but yeah, so my background and this as an adult, I guess, and career-wise, I live in Clemson, South Carolina, which is a small little college town in the northwestern corner of South Carolina. And my wife and I and our kids travel some as well. So we end up going other places too, but this is the part of the country I love, right near the Appalachian Mountains. And I went to school here. And after I graduated with a biology degree, I got into real estate investing and just started becoming an entrepreneur, flipping houses. And this is kind of a circuitous route to get where I am. But I from there, just making a living as an entrepreneur, I got into rental properties as well. And that's more what we have a business partner, and the two of us own rental properties today in Clemson. And we have self-managed those in the past, but now we have mainly other people managing those for us. And we kind of manage them from a higher level as asset managers and acquire some properties here and there, sell some properties, make some loans. And that's what pays the bills. And then I have fun sharing some knowledge and helping out other people as well on the side.
Yeah, it's pretty tremendous, and it's pretty cool to be able to basically go from a place of, you were you had the football career in college at Clemson, and then taking that to translating a lot of what you learned there into the real estate investing, and then now coming full circle of being able to actually help others get into real estate investing and find their own financial independence.
Yeah, sports. My website's called Coach Carson because I just always loved sports, and I really enjoyed the role that sports plays in people's lives. And so I thought it was a good metaphor for business when I started thinking about it. And when you're I played football as a middle linebacker, and kind of the team aspect of sports was always fun to me. And so when I got into business and having to be an entrepreneur, I knew sort of intuitively because of sports, I was like, all right, well, even if I'm the star player, if I'm the quarterback, I've got to have like a really good supporting team. I got to have an attorney here. I got a realtor here. I got to have people who help me. And so I think that just some of those intuitive things you learn from sports are very helpful from the team aspect. And then also just from your personal, you've got adversity, you're going to have challenges, you're going to have things that don't go well, and you don't win a championship just by showing up. You've actually got to do all like the details behind the scenes that nobody really gets to see. I learned that from college football, because you played 11 or 12 games a year, and those are sort of like the icing on the cake. Those are a lot of fun, but thousands of hours behind the scenes, we're just grinding away, running a gasser, in the middle of the summer when it's 95 degrees and nobody's watching. Like, how do you do that, and how well do you do that is really the determination on how you do in the football field. And I find that's like a direct translation to entrepreneurship, because so much of the sexy stuff is, hey, look at this property I bought on Instagram, or working a 15-hour day, or having like tons of setbacks. So I think all of those, for any of you out there who like sports, if you like it and you kind of understand that, I think that translates very well.
Yeah, and I love that, and I would love to know kind of more behind your initial drive. Like, what made you so driven at an early age?
I think with my business, it was the desire to have flexibility and freedom. I think I read it too, Evan, that you were sort of interested in the pre-med route at some point, and
Yeah,
I was as well. And I was just interested in biology and just science. I just thought it was cool. But when I started looking at the career of going and working and making money in that respect and going to school, it just felt a little too contained for me. It might be my fault, or my weakness or my strength. I don't know, whatever it was. That sort of drove me to say, you know what, I think I would rather have the risk of failing in a business than have the success, quote, success of having kind of guaranteed money and the ability to do what I want, but have to do it on other people's terms. So that was really a big motivation for me, that I had played football and had all these meetings all the time. And it's almost like a military environment where they're just making me go
yeah.
here and go here, go here. So when I got done with that, I was like, I do not want to have another required meeting for the rest of my life. I just want to do what I want to do, have my own schedule. And being an entrepreneur, to me, that was the allure of it, just the daily schedule, the way you can, yes, it's hard, but you can control a lot of your own time.
So walk us through kind of going into real estate investing and that first deal.
So what happened when I first started was I didn't have any capital because I just got out of college. I basically had about $1,000 that I'd saved up just from extra scholarship money and things like that. And I was fortunate enough though that I had family members who had been in real estate. So my father had rental properties. My mom is a dentist, so she had her own practice. So back in Noonan, Georgia, where I was from, they were basically mentors to me the first year or so. And I just moved back in at home. And I found a way to go out and find deals for my father's real estate business. So he told me the criteria he was looking for. He said, here's a rental property I'm looking for. Here's the locations. Here's the type of things I'm looking for. And I would basically, what we call down south, I would bird dog a deal
Yep.
for my dad. And whenever I found a deal that he wanted, he would pay me $2,000 for that. And so that was my way to get started. Basically, this works in any business, but in real estate investing particularly, if you take one little slice of the business, there was no way I had enough knowledge to figure out how to manage properties, how to fix them up, how to get the money for them. So I really concentrated for like 2 or 3 months on one little slice of the business, which is how do you evaluate and find a good deal on the very, very front end of that. And then I got good at it. I just talked to a ton of realtors. I sent a lot of letters out. I knocked on doors. I did a lot of the things that other people, my dad included, weren't willing to do, just by being a person who didn't know what couldn't work.
Oh, yeah.
I just went out and did it. And it was a really informative year because I learned how to find deals. I made a little bit of money. I lived at home. And then after a year, I decided to branch off on my own. And I had a good friend of mine from college. He and I went into business together, and we started taking those same skills I'd learned as a bird dog, but started buying deals by ourselves with using private money and some other sources of money from other people.
So from that initial learning period for you and that bird dogging and being, uber concentrated and focused on one specific task within the whole realm of real estate investing, is that something you would recommend for those getting started?
Yeah, I don't think anybody needs to follow like an exact path. Like you don't need to say, hey, I need to be a bird dog just like
Right.
Chad. Although like being a deal finder, to me, deal finding is one of the most important skills in real estate investing. Whether you're buying 100-unit apartment, commercial buildings, mobile homes, houses, if you're the one who can find the deal, like you
Yeah.
always have a job. I mean, that's just the way it works. But I think that basic idea that you can go and learn one little slice of the business and become an expert at that slice is such a critical first step for all of us, because especially as a young new entrepreneur, you got to figure out, how am I going to fit into a culture of a business, or if you're going to go to a big corporation or something, even how do I fit in and add value and make myself invaluable? And to me, it's knowledge. Like knowledge is a really big deal. And so I think all of us need to get really good at learning something. And to this day, that's one of my most fun things to do. Like I like to have a new topic. When I started doing YouTubing or when I started doing podcasts, it was like, I know nothing about this stuff. And so I just make a lesson plan. All right, for the next 2 or 3 months, I'm going to just go deep on this topic. I'm going to get really good at this thing at one little small slice. And when you do that, you'll be amazed that people who've been in a business for 5, 10 years but who've been kind of doing it casually and not really focusing and concentrating on it, you will know some things that are fresh and new and valuable that some of those people won't know. And that's a way you can make some money early on as a employee, as an entrepreneur, or whatever it is. And I think that's translatable to anything.
Yeah, I love that. And I completely agree. I think if you can focus in on one specific task, or even like you said, like actually like take a concerted action plan, like say, okay, for the next 3 months, I'm going to learn YouTube for my marketing of my business or marketing of my skills. I love that. I think that's very applicable to like any industry of just getting better at one specific task within your business.
Then you start stacking those up was really fun. I've looked back sometimes. I have a conversation with my wife and we talk about job security. And I look back on it, all the different skills like you just talked about that I've had to pick up, from bookkeeping to being a contractor to, even like checking title on properties. Like how many times have I got like I didn't feel like the paralegal was doing that great of a job and I had to follow behind them and do some stuff. And so there's so many skills like that where after 15 years of being an entrepreneur or 20 years, I could be all sorts of different businesses and I have tons of job security because I have all these skills that I could then go build upon. And it's kind of like you think about when you compound stock growth or real estate growth, you acquire this portfolio of stocks or assets, but you can do the same thing as a person. You can compound your knowledge, you can compound your skills, and you should. Like if you've been in business for 15, 20 years and you don't have a bunch of skills, like what's going on here? Like you need to look back and figure out a way to kind of fill some of those gaps.
And I agree. I mean, just thinking back, the first house we invested in, I mean, we didn't really know 100% what we were doing. First rehab we were doing, we were scared out of our minds of like all these different things that could come out of the walls. And we ended up making a very good profit on that. And it was like, but going into it, you're like, oh my God, a million things could go wrong. But you take action, you learn, you ask a bunch of questions from people that have already done it before you, and you keep moving forward.
Yeah, and you got paid to get an education on that house, right?
Yeah.
What
exactly.
a good
deal. Exactly. Yeah, I try to get everybody on that real estate investing train because once you take that action on that first deal, then you're probably most likely going to get hooked and want to keep doing it over and over again. And then it becomes a living at that point.
I love it. Well said.
So take us through. So after you've gotten your own investments with your partner, what kind of deals were you looking at the beginning, and how did you scale that?
So in the very beginning, we basically followed a fix and flip model for single family houses. So we're in the upstate of South Carolina. So we would be kind of outside of Greenville, South Carolina, which is our big metro area. And we would find foreclosures, we would find fixer uppers, all the different ways that you think of, like that might be like of a distressed property where it needs work, where it's below value at the moment. And we start off just buying a couple a year. Like our first year, I think we did 2. Our second year, we did 3 or 4. And so we would just buy it, fix it, flip it, buy it, fix it, flip it. And we're very focused kind of I got really good at the foreclosure market, where I would work on either finding a foreclosure sale and doing a short sale, or sometimes we would buy it from the bank once they had taken it back. So that's for 2 or 3 years, that's what our business looked like. It was just trying to make chunks of money, fixing and flipping a property. Pretty shortly, I think we started in 2003, 2004, 5, 6, about 2006. And maybe late 2005, we started keeping a few properties. So we had got enough of a foundation, set aside a little bit of money. I had moved into a house hack. So I moved into a 4-plex building where I lived in 1 unit and rented the other 3 out. So I had essentially all of my income from those 3 rentals paying for my living expenses where I live. So I felt like I had a really solid foundation. And so the 2 of us started buying some rental properties as well, just mainly still flipping, but we started kind of stacking those up because over the long run, I think it came to us that flipping is just another job. It's just another business. It's fun. If you develop some property or you develop a certain house, that's great. I love it to this day. But I also had some aspirations, and my business partner did too, of being able to take a little bit of a break, I think I read the 4-Hour Work Week about that time.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, like back to my itch of traveling. Like I met my wife, or now wife at that point, and like, hey, we want to travel abroad. We want to take these long, slow trips to South America, to Europe. And so looking at the real estate business, I tried to work it backwards and say, I don't want to just get big and have a bunch of properties and flip just for flipping's sake, just to say I did it. This is a tool to get me to a certain kind of lifestyle and a certain kind of place in my life. And so we're always trying to reverse engineer that to say, what's the least number of properties, or the most efficient way we can do it to make the income we need and to build the wealth we need in order to make that kind of time flexibility happen.
So, and that brings up a good point as far as like living your life by design. Like in the, what Tim Ferriss talks about in 4 Hour Work Week is like, how are you picking the amount of like the certain type of lifestyle first, and then coordinating that with the amount of monthly income, and then figuring out how many rental properties are coordinated with that?
Yeah, it's very similar to the process he talked about in the book. But it did start with a lifestyle, but I didn't figure it out like ahead of time. I had to like bump into the wall and do it wrong before I figured it out. It was actually 2007, which is right before the big recession, right before everything hit the fan. And we got really good at buying properties. Like I think in 1 year we had 37 or 36 closings. Don't remember the exact number. And a lot of those are multi-unit properties. Some of those are wholesale. Some of those are flips. Some of those are rental properties. But we got really good at finding the deals and financing them. But at the end of the year, we sat back and thought about it like, well, wait a minute, like, why are we getting good at like buying and selling a bunch of properties? Are we accomplishing the kind of lifestyle we want? And the question was no. The answer was no at that time. And my business partner and I remember to this day, we sat down and each of us wrote down like, what is it during a typical day that would be a great lifestyle for us? And I remember writing things down like, I want to play pickup basketball for 2 hours in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And I want to travel abroad and live in another country. And we started translating those activities to money. And some of them were free, like going to play pickup basketball at the gym. It cost zero money. It was free. But what I didn't have was the amount of time. And so it's like, there's always between your time and your money. And many of us, myself included, we sell out our most precious commodity, which is our time and our flexibility, in order to make like a minuscule more, even $20,000 more. We give up like most of our lives. And so we took a step back. We said, all right, wait a minute. We're not going to flip as many houses. First of all, we just got to like survive this recession first and foremost. So we had to kind of buckle down the hatches, sold a few properties, reshifted our strategy a little bit. But the big picture clarity for us was that this business is designed to make a certain amount of income, and preferably with as little of our time as possible. That's the end goal. It's never get down to no time, but we wanted to get it where maybe an hour a week we're making a full-time income from real estate. And that's possible once you get some systems, once you get some processes, once you own the right types of properties. And we were not there in 2007, but fast forward, 5 or 6 years, once we got through the recession, once we were able to clean up our portfolio a little bit, that was more of a realistic possibility. Probably by 2016 or 17 was it was really where I could say that happened.
So, and that's awesome to hear that. Like it really took like clarity on the lifestyle first, and then translating that over to what kind of properties, what kind of business, and how can we get from there to as little time as possible on our business, actively on our business. I think that's phenomenal, nugget of information for all of our listeners. And taking that, like what kind of properties were those that you were looking for? You're like, hey, these are the ones that can be as hands-off as possible.
I think it depends for everybody. Originally, we thought single family houses were the answer for us. Like one of my favorite books to this day is a book called Building Wealth One House at a Time by John Schaub. And he's been a mentor and somebody who's really helped me a lot. But I think we looked at it, we have to look at our local niche. And in my niche, in my market, we sort of stumbled upon like small multifamily college student rentals is one of the just the best investments we could make in our market. It just had the best fundamentals, the best financials. And so we started acquiring more of those because it was working. And we built systems around that. So those are not as passive as a single family house where somebody stays for 10 years, but they were a little bit more profitable for us. And so what we decided to do is build a system around that. And so we initially hired, like just kind of a main key person who would be our manager, bookkeeper, and she did an amazing job. And up until about a year ago, was our sort of person who did 95% of the work. And then I would be able to manage things. Like we were in 17 months and I was able to pay bills every Thursday for about an hour, but she was on the ground local, and she would scan all my bills in. She would get things, take care of the tenant turnover. I would sign leases, but I would do it remotely. So like it really was a pretty virtual business. And that was one way to do it. The other way we have done since then, she's decided to step back and retire and not spend as much time, as we have just hired third-party managers to manage our college rentals. And so that's also, it's a little bit more new to us. We've been doing it a couple of years, but in some ways even better, because I don't have to run the business. I'm just sort of managing the manager as an asset manager. And I really like that idea of hiring a good business. And you have to hire the CEO, you have to hire their operations, and you have to check. If they do a good job, it makes it even less of a time constraint for yourself.
So how many units do you own currently?
It's about 110 total. And so some of those are, there's a 12-plex here, there's a 14-unit building here. So some of those are kind of groups, but that's the total that we have, my business partner and I.
And that's mainly focused on student rentals?
Yeah, I'd say definitely over half of those. We have some houses, we have some mobile homes, some other ones that are just, faculty members or just regular people who work nearby. So it's not all of them, but a big chunk of those are definitely college student rentals.
That's great. And I love how that all goes back to, again, like the lifestyle design and being able to finance that. And in, what we talked about before we jumped on here is, you and your family got to live for, what was it, a year and a half in Ecuador?
Right. Yeah, it was about 17 months. Yeah. So that was 2017. So I mentioned that earlier as kind of we'd had some other intermediate dates where my wife had traveled, and we went for 4 months in 2009, like right during the recession. We're like, let's just take off and take a break for a little while. And we backpacked around South America, but we essentially just saved up the money to do that. Like instead of buying a $20,000 car, we said, all right, we'll just save our money and buy a trip and put things on hold. Whereas 2017 was really cool, kind of from a business standpoint too, where we had enough money coming in, and we had some systems and really good people on the ground to where my wife and I and our 2 kids could just take off. And so we left in January 2017, got back in 2018, and we lived in Cuenca, Ecuador, which is a really cool city, older city up in the mountains of Ecuador, about 8,000 feet up. And our kids went to local schools, and my wife's a Spanish teacher. So like language learning, and that has always kind of fascinated us. And so our kids, we wanted them to become fluent. And the best way to do that is immersing them in a place where they can't speak anything but Spanish.
Right.
So I felt kind of bad at first, like, oh, what are we doing to our kids? They speak like 8 words of Spanish, and we just dropped them off at school, said, have fun today. And, but they were very resilient, and it didn't happen overnight. But about 5 or 6 months in, I had a big head start learning Spanish and was proficient. I could get by and speak. And by the 6 months into that, we would be sitting around the dinner table talking Spanish, and my kids would correct me and say, "Papa, no se dice eso," and they'd wag their finger at me and like correct my grammar or correct my pronunciation. And I was like, this is beautiful. My 6 and 4-year-olds are correcting my Spanish. I love it.
That is really cool. And I told you that's part of our goal too, is, and I think a lot of our Monumental listeners is like having the ability to just go to Ecuador for 17 months if that's what your family wants. And that's a lifestyle that you can create through multifamily investing, through real estate investing, through owning passive income. You can go travel the world. You can, give that opportunity to your children and help them learn Spanish and help yourself learn Spanish. That's my goal too, is one day, be able to be fluent in Spanish.
Yeah. I mean, some people listening might not want to go travel abroad, but whatever your thing is, that really my passion and my own business and my own life and with what I do, like talking on podcasts to people, is that you can choose to do what matters to you. And that's really what it's all about. That's the epiphany I had reading the 4-Hour Work Week, say, wait a minute, I'm not just working to flip houses. Like, I'm working to do what matters. Like I want to make money. I want to build wealth. I want to give a better life for my kids. I want to have a rich life where we do things that are enjoyable. But then even beyond that, what I feel is like calling me even more too, is like, we have to make an impact. Like we all of us have these skills, we have these things that we're good at, these gifts. And, to the extent that we use them and that you put those gifts to play in the world, we're happy, we're fulfilled. And then to the extent that we kind of live a straight jacket life where we do some job and we sell out just for money, and we work our whole lives just for money without using those gifts, helping people, I feel like we're all missing something. And that's not just me. That's like, what's the name of the psychologist who did the trying to think of the name right now. Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Oh, yes.
To me there. Basically, you can take care of your basic needs. You can get your food paid for. You can even get your fancy car. You can do all this stuff. But to the extent that you have this calling to do something more, like, you'll still lack something. And I found for myself, I'm pointing my finger at me first, that happens a lot. And when I talk to a lot of people, they feel the same way. Like, hey, wait a minute, I've got a great job. I'm doing all these things. How come there's still something more? And for me, at least, that do what matters is the way I sort of wrap my head around it, is that as you get more money, as you get more financial independence, as you get more stability, it's almost like you get to re-ask that question when you ask yourself when you're 16 and 18 years old, like, what am I going to do when I grow up?
Yeah.
Like, what am I all about? And it's fun. Like, it's like, I feel like a kid again, sometimes getting to think about, all right, well, what am I going to do with my day? How can I help people? How can I make an impact? And I don't need to worry about money. It's like, money is useful to the extent that it's a resource that can help you make that impact. Like, if you have a nonprofit and you want to make money, like, yes, go make some money. But if you're a teacher who's not been teaching because it doesn't make much money, and you can go and work for $40,000 a year and do the thing you're supposed to do, like, I just think that's really cool. And that we should allow, encourage more people to do that kind of thing. Like, society needs that, we need that. And money is just a tool to help us to do that.
Yes. And that's exactly where the mindset and the idea behind Monumental is from, is helping people realize their full potential through that financial freedom, through that financial independence that real estate investing, multifamily investing creates, so that they can in turn make their own monumental impact in the world. And that's like the genesis behind our company too, is like real estate for impact. That's really important for us, because we know that, we're not just building multifamily housing, we're building somebody's home, right? Like, you're building community. And so completely agree with everything you're saying. And I love that mission behind what you're doing.
Yeah, and you just made me think about real estate too. Real estate really is a mission. I love that your idea of monumental real estate as well, because we have a privilege to be able to house people. Most of their lives happen in their homes, their office spaces, and so there's just multiple levels of cool impact you can make when you make money. The people you live with, if you treat them well, they have a good place to live, and they raise their kids well, and it's a cool business to be in, which we're probably preaching to the choir. There's probably people who are like, yeah, of course, Chad, we know that, but I'm just affirming what you're saying.
So at what point did CoachCarson.com enter into the business?
Yeah, it's been a hobby for a long time. I turned it into a business a couple of years ago because I was starting to find I was getting enough success that I had a big bill to pay for my email subscriber list and things like that. So like, wait a minute, like, this is not a hobby. This is a business. I got to make some money. But it started back in 2009, actually, or 2008, when people were, some people, you were doing some things well locally, and they're like, how do you do that? So I'd have some consulting opportunities, and I started some local mastermind groups just on the side, and had some fun with it. And I've been writing for a long time, just probably since 2008 or 9, just to help me learn. So I really love the process of, I would read a book, I would go to a seminar, I would take notes, I would condense the ideas, I would assimilate them, and then I would share them with somebody else. And so being the old saying is that being the teacher is, you have to become the student to do that. And so I've always loved that process of learning and sharing. So that's the genesis of CoachCarson.com. Is I started just writing it down for like 10 people and 20 people locally in South Carolina. And then I figured out that, wait a minute, like, there's this thing called a blog where more than 10 people will read this thing. Like, I need to put it up there.
Yeah.
This is crazy. And so I started writing on biggerpockets.com. They've been a big part of my, supporting me to help get started. And I ended up writing a book for them a few years ago. And that's all sort of grown from there. Apparently there's other people who want to learn about learn about real estate like I did. And it's been a fun process to help other people.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal the amount of following that you've generated from your blog and from your content, from your books. And have you had experiences where people are giving you examples? I'm sure you have, but I'd love to hear maybe one or two examples of people that you've impacted.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Like you get emails sometimes, and somebody says, "Hey, I'm thinking of one in particular." Somebody emailed me this week and said they had just done a house hack. Which, for those who don't know what that means, like I did, you move into a home and you either rent out the extra bedrooms, or you rent out the basement, or you move into a duplex and rent it out. That's my soapbox is just saying everybody in their 20s or 30s ought to get a house hack first, because it just makes so much sense to reduce your housing expense and have a real estate investment. And so I preach that a lot. And there's been people who sent me an email and saying, like, that totally changed the trajectory of where I was going in my 20s. I've done that now. Now I own 3 rental properties. And, they say, well, thank you for the ideas. I'm like, well, you're the one who did it. Like, I wrote something on a blog, and you took the ideas and ran with it. So it's been very fulfilling in that way. And sometimes I have to remind myself, you probably the same way, like you're spending all this time doing podcasts and writing this stuff. And I'll have moments I'm like, all right, wait a minute. I think maybe I've done enough of this. But then you get an email like that, and it's like, puts you on fire again. You're like, all right, this is very helpful to people. It's because not everybody has like, I had a father who was in rental properties. Like, what a luxury I had. Like, I feel like sometimes it's an obligation that, you come from a family or somewhere where it's pretty easy. Like, I feel like I did not have a hard job learning this stuff, because it was such an easy path, where somebody else might have never heard it from anybody in their family. Maybe they didn't have the environment, and them reading your blog or listening to your podcast might spark an idea that they hadn't heard before, or they heard it in a different way, and it sets them on a different trajectory. And that to me is like the brilliance of online media and marketing, that we've kind of separated the ladders that you had to get between people, and we can now help each other with very little friction. And so I love that idea. And it applies not only to educating people about real estate and entrepreneurship. I've started playing around with this in my local community too, where I have a nonprofit trying to help build trails and change the culture of people in my little small southern town, and encourage them to walk more and prioritize and spend money on the government level on biking and walking infrastructure, because I think it's really important and I'm passionate about it. And so we've asked ourselves, like, how do we affect change? How do we do this locally? And it's the same thing. It's like, all right, I've used my money that I made from Coach Carson to hire interns from the university to make videos and social media for my local charity. And we're going to do the same thing. It's a very leveraged way to make an impact, whether it's a business, whether it's a charity, whether it's politicians do it. They all get it now. If you don't know how to use social media and online media now, it's like the superpower of our time. And I'm passionate about that too. It's a fun thing to learn and to apply.
Yes. And I completely agree. I love how you pull that from your business all the way to your nonprofit of, leveraging social media, leveraging a platform that doesn't really cost you anything other than making the content.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very impactful for your business, as I'm sure, everything that you're doing is impacted where you are today. Same with Monumental. It's amazing to see the connections that have been made because of just creating a podcast.
Yeah, I don't know why more people don't start like realtors and real estate investors. I mean, you and I are in the podcast space, the more the merrier, right? But, if I were starting over as the bird dog when I first started, like if I'd had that right then, I would start a little local podcast. I'd buy the $50 USB mic, I'd plug it into my laptop, and I would go around and interview the mayor of the town. I would interview the local realtors. I would make them look like celebrities, and I would create, maybe I have 100 listeners. I don't know, but out of those 100 listeners, I would generate deals. I would get private money. And so this thing applies to everybody. It's really the barriers to entry are lower than they've ever been.
Yep.
You can learn how to do this stuff.
Yeah. I love how you brought that up too, about like interviewing the mayor, interviewing top realtor. Like, it's very true. It's a great way it's a huge excuse to just talk to people that you probably wouldn't get the opportunity otherwise. And exactly what you said actually is something that is part of my 2020 goal for Monumental, is to interview more mayors, more city leaders, because I know that it's a way for me to make connections and grow my network for what we do in the affordable workforce housing space.
That's cool.
Because those are decision makers that make decisions on where to put affordable housing, where to finance it, where to fund it. And so that's a proactive approach we're taking this year.
That's so smart. Yeah. Not only do you build that relationship, but then you get to learn. For an hour, you're sitting there talking to a person who knows a lot about that topic and who's on the inside. So that's, I mean, what a win-win opportunity.
Yeah. And building rapport. So as far as what's coming up in 2020 for Coach Carson, as far as like the personal side, the life side and the business side, what are you most excited about?
From a life side, to be honest, is really simple. Like I feel like I've done a decent job of this, but just being a present dad and family member is like actually at the top of my list. Is something that I feel like I do. My weakness, my strength is that I'm really good at organizing my business. I'm an entrepreneur. These things are all great, but I feel like being present and showing up and putting the cell phone away and just being present with other people, particularly my kids and my family, is a challenge. And so that's just being honest. And so that's one of my top priorities, is just figure out, can I do that? Can I still have ambitious goals, which are important to me, which I feel like I'm called to do, while also doing like putting the main thing. So that's just kind of getting control of my schedule and having, I'm really big on time blocks. So like when I create podcasts and YouTubes, I try to batch time and block time, and this is my time to do it. We'll do the same thing. Like if I can do that with the podcast, do the same thing with my family time and with just sitting around playing and learning with my kids and going to activities, taking them to dance, like those kind of things that's a growth opportunity for me. So that's the top one. And then within the business, I have the Coach Carson business. I'm playing around with YouTube a lot more. I'm having fun making videos and just kind of going on site. I bought a camera to go to some of we're remodeling a project, go behind the scenes, do a little bit of vlogging. That's something I hadn't played around with much. So that's going to be fun. And then just with my nonprofit locally is we're doing we've finally made some tractions in the last year. So we're, I think, getting some trails on the ground. And as I mentioned earlier, we're hiring some interns to make videos and to just kind of keep this local movement going where we are. And none of that makes money. Like none of that's like a business. And it's probably the most passionate thing, exciting thing I have going on. And so I think that's kind of the fun part. As I look back on it, I'm realizing some of the goals that I had in terms of not having to, the money is important. Real estate investing is still the engine, but I always wanted to spend the least time on that while still moving that forward and have time to give back with Coach Carson and have fun learning and to spend a ton of time on my family and my community as well. So I'm not perfect with it, but that's sort of where my goals and my head is.
That's powerful. I love how, it's geared around having that centered focus time with family first, and building your business and your nonprofit and your impact around what you're most passionate about and what you most desire in the world.
That's the goal. We keep trying at it every day, right?
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Well, let's jump into our monumental questions.
Let's do it.
What does success mean to you?
I think success means living life on your terms. And I think that leaves it vague enough, but specific as well. So it's what we talked about earlier, doing what matters. Like we all know what matters to us. If we really, I've asked so many people that question, and there's usually a specific role, there's usually a specific person, but to the extent that you say that's my priority, and then you live that priority, we're never perfect, but like if you can get close to that, where your ideals and your life and what you actually do are aligned, that's success. That's whatever that looks like. That could be being a parent, that could be, donating your time, it could be, whatever, but that's success to me. I
love it. And what about daily habits and morning rituals?
Yeah, morning ritual for me, I had like kind of a miracle morning kind of thing for a long time, where I either 5 minutes to 30 minutes, somewhere in there, depending on the time I have. I'll get up, I'll do meditation, I'll do some just like writing down my goals, thinking about things, mantras, just having like kind of almost like a reset for the day. Right, just bringing my head back to what the things that are important to me. So that typically happens, and then I do a little bit of movement, exercise. I like to do exercise in the morning if I can, but sometimes it's stretching. Sometimes it's actual like going out and running or doing some push-ups or doing something like that. So that's my morning ritual. And then I mentioned earlier, some of my best just kind of professional habits are time batching, of just having these 2 or 3 hours are an appointment with myself to do creative work. And that applies in the real estate business too. Like the other day, I spent 2 or 3 hours just thinking about our portfolio, looking at the spreadsheets, asking questions. As you do that, you start making a to-do list. All right, here's some projects we got to work on. I remember reading one time that Warren Buffett spends most of his day like just sitting there, like reading, like and thinking. And I thought, all right, the most successful investor of all time spends most of his time reading and thinking. That's interesting. Yeah, I think we all could use some of that. I think most of us are so busy doing,
Right.
and it's difficult because when you're an entrepreneur, you got to get stuff done. But to the extent that you can put walls around some of those deep work, deep thinking times, that's been one of the best productivity habits I've built.
Yes, and I've recently read Cal Newport's Deep Work book.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. He talks exactly about that, of batching your time and blocking out time for deep thinking, deep work, creative work.
Yes.
So what about favorite book or book you're currently reading?
So this might be kind of nerdy on my topics that I'm interested in, but there's a book called Walkable City by Jeff Speck. And it's
Yeah,
actually, I
that's a great
actually
book.
read it. Oh, you've heard of it. Good. All right. So
Yeah.
it's Walkable City is the original book. He wrote another one that I'm reading now called Walkable City Rules. And it's more of like a practical doer's manual for how do you translate some of the concept of walkable city into that. And this is actually like, this is a passion of mine because of my nonprofit and trying to build the city. But my passion started with real estate investing, because here I am, an investor studying neighborhoods, studying properties. And one of the qualities that always came up to me was distinguishing between like suburban kind of sprawl neighborhoods and the in-town urban, or even if it's a suburban area, a walkable suburban area. And one of my convictions with real estate investing is that over the next 10 to 15 years, the both urban and suburban areas are the ones that are going to have outlandish, or outlandish is the right word, overweighted results and growth compared to the ones that are sprawl. And if you look at it from a finance level of a city, which is what Walkable City and also some other books like Strong Towns show, is that the suburban sprawl cities have a hard time paying their bills compared to the more urban kind of, or at least the urban style, kind of old style of building. So topic for as a real estate investor, but also if you get in urban planning and city planning itself, it's really, really fascinating how it works.
Yeah. I highly recommend that to everybody listening. A Walkable City, great book. It's eye-opening because you're like, whoa, like I never thought about how much walkability of a city matters and how cities are laid out, how they're planned out, how new parts of town are planned out.
Right.
It all has an impact on the future of a city.
Yeah, and it gives you a little bit of a superpower as an investor to anticipate where you should invest, because we're always trying to get ahead of the other investors. Like where is the best place to invest? And I value certain parts of my town more than other investors do, because I just see like, all right, this could be the next downtown because it's walkable, it's got a grid, it's got this is on the bus line, and other people might not value that as much. But I see that as if a town's growing and getting bigger, it's going to become more valuable. So these are the kind of insights that we as an investor, sometimes you have to go outside of the normal little real estate books that people read in order to get some insights that help you out. Yeah,
I love it. Well, Chad, I'm blown away by our conversation today. I've loved talking to you and learning about your mission and what you're doing in the world and how you're helping others and sharing that with our audience. How can our audience reach out to you or follow you?
You can go to coachcarson.com. That's where I hang out a lot. And from there, you can find my podcast and my YouTube channel. And I have a big library of blog articles there as well. And feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from everybody. And thank you for what you're doing too. I think we resonate on a lot of levels, and really appreciate what you're doing as a real estate investor, but also from your podcast, and you're doing good work.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. And then also, guys, if you enjoyed today's episode with Chad, make sure to tag both of us, tag him on Instagram. We're both very active there, and share it. Let us know you're listening. Let us know which part you resonated with the most. And do not forget to leave us a review on iTunes before you end your listening today. And guys, with that, Have a monumental day.